Thank you. And we still got a few minutes before 6 o'clock. This is that clock watching time. Good evening and welcome to the Township of North Dumfries Council meeting, Monday, January 18th, 2021. The Township of North Dumfries Council meeting for Monday, January 18th. Due to COVID-19 pandemic, Township Council meetings are currently being held electronically. Members of the public may watch or participate in this open meeting electronically using the following methods. Watch the live stream by accessing the meeting at calendar.northdumfries.ca/council. Under the video column, click on the link for the meeting date that you wish to watch. You do not need a YouTube account to watch the live stream. You cannot directly participate in the meeting via the live stream, as this is for viewing only. Second option is members of the public interested in attending as an observer or wish to speak to any of the listed items under 8.1 Committee of the Whole report or 10 items for discussion must submit the request in writing to the Clerk's Division at clerk@northdumfries.ca before 6 p.m. on Sunday, January 17th. A link and telephone number has been provided to those who registered before the registration deadline. And finally, if you would like to comment on a particular item but are not available to attend the meeting virtually, members of the public are invited to submit written comments at clerk@northdumfries.ca, which will be provided to the Mayor and Council prior to the meeting. I'd now like to call the meeting to order, please, and can I have approval of the agenda?
So moved by Councillor Gillespie and seconded by Councillor Rolleman that Council adopt the January 18th, 2021 Council agenda as presented with the following addendums. 1, add item 8.1.2C, report number PD-11-2021, proposed zoning bylaw amendment and proposed draft plan of subdivision for 2852 Cedar Creek Road. 2, add item 8.1.2D, report number PD-12-2021, proposed zoning bylaw amendment for Teco block for Cedar Creek Road. And 3, add additional correspondence received pertaining to item 8.1.2C and D. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rolleman?
Yes.
Councillor Ossner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
And Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. Is there any disclosure of pecuniary interest and general nature thereof? Seeing none, we'll move on to presentations from Christopher Goss, Superintendent with Waterloo Regional Police Services regarding speeding and speed enforcement in North Dumfries. Is he here?
He is, yes.
Excellent. Oh, there you are. Welcome.
Good evening. Is my audio working?
Perfect.
Great. I've been nothing if not challenged by technology these last few months, so fingers crossed. Certainly this appears to be starting off well. So good evening, Mayor Foxton, members of council. Thank you for inviting me this evening to discuss road safety in North Dumfries Township. My proposal is to run through some information, then answer any questions that might arise. A little bit of background, South Division, which covers North Dumfries Township, has 116 police officers working there, 101 of which are constables. We run 7 or 8 zones, depending on how many officers are working on a given shift. We have 4 platoons. They work in rotation. We average about 23 officers per platoon, but when you factor in training requirements, vacation, injuries, sick time, parental leaves, and so forth, we put about 14 officers out on the road to cover our division, which is the city and the township, on any given shift. North Dumfries Township is our zone 7, and 2 of those 14 officers are assigned to the township. Just a quick look at statistics for the 4th quarter. For our zone 7 or the township, we average 1,000 citizen generated calls per year for service in the township. And a citizen generated call for service is when someone calls the police for assistance. So it differs from a traffic stop or an officer investigating something previously reported. And this number has been pretty consistent over the last number of years. Across the region, we have 97,000 citizen generated calls. So about a little over 1% of them occur in North Dumfries. It's a big area to police. We have a reasonable response time of about 12 minutes for priority calls. And that's not such a bad thing to live in an area where police calls for assistance aren't as frequent as they might be in other communities. For some perspective, City of Cambridge generates 27,000 citizen generated calls for service. It has 12 officers. So we feel our deployment of resources is equitable based on the call demand. Considerable pressures across the region on police resources, and our deployment needs to be responsive to all of the priority needs. We're one police service, we're finite number of officers, only so many of us. And the reason I mentioned resources and staffing is it's relevant to the amount of time that we can devote to things like road safety and speeding in particular. Some of those competing interests, I'm sure, are well known to many people on the call. Mental health calls continue to rise, opioid addiction, policing the Reopening Ontario Act and the emergency measures, the complexity of investigations, increases in violent crime, all require a number of resources. So in municipalities across the region, there are requests for road safety and proactive work that are sometimes difficult to resource. The invitation tonight was on road safety and speeding. I'll move quickly into that. The information for tonight, to me anyway, didn't have any specific areas of complaint, so my comments are fairly general. We did have an area of concern over last summer around Hall Street in Maine, and that was primarily due to construction on Northumberland. I understand a lot of that resolved when the construction was completed. Generally speaking, construction tends to make poor driving habits even worse. People feel delayed, inconvenienced, speeds increase. We also find the streets that traffic gets diverted onto, they're not used to that level of traffic and those driving behaviors, so sometimes we see complaints go up for that reason. But I will tell you that we are happy to receive driving complaints. We use them as part of the analysis that we do around where we put our road safety resources, because nobody knows better what's happening in a neighborhood than the people who live there. So we very much welcome them. Online reporting, and I underline online reporting, is the best way. It's easily accessed through our website. A quick Google search for Waterloo Regional Police will get you there. It's not for in-progress complaints, not for emergencies, but perfect for ongoing speeding or other driving issues. If you go into the website, there's a link off the banner. Very easy to fill out a form and submit it. There's no waiting on hold. There's no trying to get to the right extension. The information is analyzed by our frontline support unit, and it goes to where it needs to be and helps us craft our enforcement. In terms of enforcement for 2020, North Dumfries Township, we laid 1,041 charges. 740 of them were for speeding, 20 for impaired driving, 62 for aggressive driving, which is following too closely, careless driving, things that tend to end up in accidents. And then all of the other driving categories added up to the 1,041. We're in that moment in time where we've done some analysis of our 2020 numbers, but not all of it, still compiling and analyzing, but I can give you some rough comparison based on 4th quarter numbers for 2020, comparing municipalities. So in our 4th quarter in North Dumfries, we laid 533 charges. We laid 512 in Wilmot, 263 in Wellesley, 579 in Woolwich. Comparators with the urban centers are not really helpful because they have more zones, more deployed officers. They tend to have more accidents and criminal driving. which drives numbers up. But the Q4 comparison represents how things generally stack up across the townships and specifically. So we have some comfort that we are, my apologies, I'm on call tonight. They're looking to get a hold of me, but they can wait.
And Andrew, while he's busy, oh, go ahead, Chris.
I'm back. I'm back. I sent him a quick message and we're good to go. So we're pretty confident that our road safety is deployed equitably across the townships and municipalities. So what can we do about road safety? I think probably that's the one thing we can talk about tonight that will really help to solve the problem, because enforcement is not just about handing out tickets. It's about changing driving behavior. Sometimes people living in the immediate area will be among the people that we stop for offenses. People have many reasons for aggressive driving, for not following the rules of the road, probably as many reasons as there are drivers. But safe driving is everybody's responsibility. We all as partners have a role to play. The bottom line is that it's dangerous, fast and aggressive driving. If people stuck to the rules of the road, follow the Highway Traffic Act, reduce the speed, come to a full stop at stop signs, don't jump lights, don't run lights, put away the cell phone and the beer, don't get angry at others using the road, keep your eyes ahead. Down road, there'll be far fewer accidents. So really we're working against behaviors and bad habits, and in some cases human nature. Speed, a particular problem, it's simple physics. My old physics teacher will kill me if I don't get this right, but speed is distance over time. So the faster you go, the less reaction time you have, and accident avoidance is all about reaction time. A couple of things to think about. One of the great developments, I think, coming to our region is automated speed enforcement. It's often called photo radar. I'm very much a proponent of this approach. It's not known yet, or at least hasn't been firmly decided where the sites will be located. I think the township should be involved in this conversation, as we should all across the region. I think community safety zones and school zones will likely be high on the list for cameras. Highway Traffic Act offenses are what are called strict liability offenses, meaning speeding is speeding, not stopping for a red light is not stopping for a red light. It doesn't matter why, excuses aren't relevant. So it's particularly effective to use automated systems to do this type of enforcement. System detects speeding, issues a ticket to the owner. Because it's owner-based, it's important to know who's driving your vehicle and how they're driving. And really the only argument against them is that people have an intention to speed and a hope that they don't get caught. But it's 24-hour vigilant enforcement guaranteed on a roadway. The police cannot provide anything like that kind of coverage, and the same thinking would apply to red light cameras. Traffic calming, something that we're seeing more and more frequently on roads. I'm sure your roads department and the engineers are versed in this, have access to resources and research. There is cost obviously involved, and largely would defer to their expertise, but I'll touch on a few things. The flashing speeding signs, sometimes called driver feedback signs, they display the driver's speed, and they do work well to slow traffic. It's a good idea to have the speed limit sign close to the your speed display. Works best for people whose speed is creeping up a little bit versus people who are driving aggressively from a deliberate perspective. A couple of studies out of the States showed in a cut-through street over a 21-month deployment, a 50% decrease in speeding vehicles, and on an artery road over 27 months, a 25% decrease. So there is some good research out there to show the effectiveness of these signs. I can tell you I'm a cautious driver, and when I come across one, I quickly have a glance down to see what my speed's at, because I've been to a lot of bad crashes, and for that reason, my speed is at or below the limit all the time. It's far too chancy to do otherwise. I don't think the township has any permanent. As a matter of fact, I'm 99.9% certain they don't have any permanent speed signs. You have to carefully select where those areas would be, where they have the biggest impact. You can go with mobile units, and I think that I have seen mobile units out in North Dumfries, but I believe on a couple of regional roads, I'm not sure. I kind of asked the officers working out that area to have a quick look, and they didn't see any up and running last week. Signage on the roadway is another thing to consider. This is for slower roadways, 50K or slower, and that signage right on the center line visually narrows the lane It's kind of an in-your-face reminder to slow down. They have to come down in plowing season. I drive Dunbar Road in the city frequently, and I've stopped and watched. They seem to be effective. Speed bumps or speed humps, also effective ways to change the roadway. Makes higher speed traveling uncomfortable, a little hard on the vehicle. Raised crosswalks and intersections are also part of that. Some complaints from noise can be generated when they're put in place, and road maintenance is something that has to be looked at as well. And the research that I've seen says they tend to work better when you have 2 or 3 of them in sequence versus just one. But again, I defer to your roads experts and regional engineers and so forth. Stop sign placement, road redesign, realignment, curb extensions, all of those things should be considered as ways to slow people down, because again, they're always at play, whether there's a police car sitting there or not. Roundabouts, designation of community safety zones with increased fines, which I believe there are some in the township. I'm not 100% certain. And communication about signage changes is always important. As soon as you put a stop sign up in a neighborhood where there hasn't been one for 30 years, people that drive that road every day need some help remembering that it's going to be there. The last part I'll just touch on is education. The police launch a variety of road safety campaigns around aggressive driving, distracted driving, back to school safety, all about public awareness. It's in our current business plan. I'm sure it will be in the new business plan we're developing. Frankly, though, we talk about road safety, but not every driver out there is listening to us. In terms of enforcement, we supplement our patrol resources with a specialized enforcement unit out of the Traffic Services branch. They're in the township about once a week. The reason I say about once is because some weeks they work 3 days and some weeks they work 6. It just depends, but they rotate through the 7 municipalities. They are guided in their work by the complaints that we receive from the public and the issues that are brought to us by council as well. And I would also say, let's keep the dialogue going. We're always happy to hear from our partners about what you're seeing and where we can deploy ourselves better. So an email to myself or Inspector Davis certainly is welcome. Inspector Davis is currently still on the vaccine task force. I'm not sure when we're going to see her back, hopefully in the next month and a half or 2. But for the general public, the best route is by way of the online reporting. So those are my comments, Your Worship, subject to any questions council may have.
Thank you. Just a couple of things for your information. We have the automatic speed enforcement going in at Cedar Creek School.
Excellent.
So that's and the sign up, the 90-day sign of warning it's coming is already up. We already do raised sidewalks and the broader markings at stop signs and the slow on the concrete or on the pavement. But our main problem is a lot of the regional roads where we have to seek permission to put up the speed signs that we have. And Councillor Gillespie, do you want to ask some questions? Because I know you have a great concern in the village of Clyde.
Well, yes, I have. The village of Clyde is a huge problem, as well as the village of Branchton. And I'm so happy to hear that you think this flashing speed signs work, because the people at the region don't think they work at all. So I've had many discussions with them, but we are ordering a couple of those. We put them in our budget, so we hope to put those on that road. I'm really like, if people go to these online reporting, like people in Clyde could do that, and people in Branchton, is that what you're saying?
Yes, anyone is able to go there. You don't even need to be a resident of the region. It's just a way of gathering information. And if you go to our webpage, you'll see a banner, a button to click on for online reporting. It's front and center. And then it brings you to a form and you enter what your concern is. It'll be a driving issue and put in some text about the specifics of the concern. Then it goes to our frontline support unit and they analyze the information and send it out so that we know at the division where the complaints are and we can focus our enforcement there. So yeah, I know I worked for a long time, what used to be 257 zone, which covers Clyde and Branchton, and in my day ran a lot of radar out that way. So I know you've got some transition zones out there, some people coming from highways into small towns, and that doesn't always add up to the best scenario.
That's right.
So
Well,
Councillor Gillespie, if I just for a second, a couple of things I'd like staff to look into. One is that we work out a deal with the region where we can put those speed signs up in those areas that you talk about, Councillor Gillespie, several times a year. Let's say 15 times a year. And we try and get the region to do that. allow that without us having to go and ask them.
Mhm.
The other thing is I would like to see if we can get basically a point form on how to do the online reporting, and maybe have it Facebooked and tweeted out so that our people know and have access to how to do it. Just the simple steps, but I know some people a lot of times are intimidated at first on how to start. So if we can get that information out. Councillor Gillespie, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I was just going to say it's, not only the regional roads, it's the township roads as well is a problem. So yes, if we could get that onto the township e-blast, so people know that they can do that and report it, I think that would be a great help to make people the police more aware of the amount of speeding that's going on in this area. So I just have a question about when do you think photo radar would be coming to the community safety zones? Because I think, is not Clyde a community safety zone?
CEO McNeely, go ahead.
Sorry, Councillor Gillespie, at present, the current regulation issued by the province narrows the photo radar campaign exclusively to school zones. So it would actually require further adjustments provincially to either allow it in other areas to be specified and or as a general practice. So that's why in Waterloo Region, through the spring, summer of last year, it was focused exclusively on the school zones on either local or regional roads, and will be rolling out later this spring. And that's why we've started to give the 90-day notice, because that was also a prescribed provision under the regulation. So that signage on Hilltop Drive went up last week, I believe it was.
And Chris Goss, just for your information, a lot of the things we're restricted from doing because they're regional roads, such as, when you paint the white lines down either side of the road, it gives the perception of narrowing. The region won't allow that. It's their road, they don't allow it. A lot of the things that we've talked about here that you suggested, the region doesn't allow us to do on the roads that are regional roads. The ones that are not, we're doing almost all the things that you have stated, except the speed humps, which has been an interesting debate in a lot of communities. Are there any other questions?
Maybe if I could just add one quick thing, and that's I know the region is frequently concerned about traffic routes and priority access for emergency vehicles. So I know that plays in to their calculations, but certainly I'll be more than happy to get a hold of our public information office and get them a one-pager sent out through the clerk on how to access online reporting, if that's helpful.
That would be wonderful. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank you for coming tonight. And the resolution, please.
So moved by Councillor Ossner and seconded by Councillor Rolliman that the presentation received from Christopher Goss, Superintendent with the Waterloo Regional Police Services regarding speeding and speed enforcement in North Dumfries be received with thanks. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rolliman?
Yes.
Councillor Ossner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. You're not any relation to Craig Goss? Oh, I think he's gone. Or he's frozen anyway. So let's carry on, please. Next, we have Committee of the Whole reports. So motion to adjourn council and sit as Committee of the Whole.
So moved by Councillor McCreary, seconded by Councillor Ossner, that council adjourn to sit as Committee of the Whole. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rolliman?
Yes.
Councillor Ossner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. And next we have Development Services Functions. I'm to ask members of the council who would like to speak on any of the reports. Councillor Rolliman.
I'd like to speak on the report regarding the waiving of the 2-year moratorium.
And that is, which one is that again? Is that
Second one.
that is B. So, okay. Anybody else? Councilor Osner.
Is that a hybrid between Rollerman and Oster?
Oh, you're side by side, eh?
It's like the Brady Bunch there, you know.
Rod's grabbing for his coffee.
Yeah. I do have a question on that report as well. So the 812A and 812B are the same. Oh, no, they're not the same.
No.
Same development. No. So I do have a question about 8.1.2A. However, it's not to do with the letter of credit reduction. It has to do a question with the development itself. So should that wait till this is coming up tomorrow, isn't it?
CEO McNeely?
Madam Mayor, through you to Councillor Osner. No, there's no application or item in the planning public agenda for Legacy tomorrow night. The only report that's been prepared for this current cycle is the request for the reduction in the letter of credit for the public works that have been constructed through 2020.
So Councillor Osner, why don't we put you down for just to this question on Legacy, and because Legacy is the first up. Do you?
Yeah, just a quick question
Well,
though.
let me
'Cause
just ask and see if anybody else wants to go on any of the other items. See, no one, go ahead, Councillor. Oh, Councillor McCreary.
I have a question on C.
Okay. All right, so anybody else? Okay, Derek, you go ahead. Councillor Osner, go ahead.
So, yeah, I was just adding to my question because I've had phone calls about the development. And it made reference to a planning meeting on January 19th they were talking about in regards to the subdivision, the minor variance.
So Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Osner, that's the adjacent development or subdivision to the east.
Yes.
It's not the Legacy property. Tomorrow night, there's a minor variance request for the Bruce subdivision, which is situated to the east of Legacy.
Okay, sorry, that's the one I wanted to speak about. So I'm okay with not saying anything about 812A right now.
Okay. So do we want to pass 812A and 812? Members of the public have registered for B, C, and D. So we can pass 812A.
Yes, I believe D, they had only registered if there were any questions. But
Okay,
if you'd
so-
like to pull it, we can pull it as well.
Sure, so we'll do A and D. Do we want to do the separate motions we have for each of those? So let's do A first.
Okay, so for the motion for item A only.
Right now, and then we'll get to D.
So moved by Councillor Osner and seconded by Councillor McCreary that Council receive PD report number 07-2021 and that the letters of credit for Legacy Phase 1A subdivision file number 30T-14301, 828543 Ontario Incorporated and 839658 Ontario Incorporated be reduced on the recommendations of the Township Engineer as follows. 1, reduced to $1,169,622.51. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that? Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes, I guess I froze.
Councillor Rollman?
Yes.
Councillor Osner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
That carries.
Thank you. And let's go ahead with D as well.
Certainly. So moved by Councillor Osner and seconded by Councillor McCreary that report number PD-12-2021 be received and that bylaw number 3216-21 being a bylaw to rezone the lands located on concession 11 part of lot 32 RP 58 R1 R14574 Part 2 and 67R 3012 Part 1 to implement the proposed redevelopment of the subject lands for the manufacturing process employment use be recommended to council for approval, and that council, in accordance with the provisions of Section 37, subsection 17 of the Planning Act, notwithstanding that the proposed zoning bylaw amendment contains revisions updates that are different from that presented at the statutory public meeting on September 29th, 2020, council determines that further notice in respect of the proposed amendments is not required. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rolman?
Yes.
Councillor Osner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. Now we'll go into discussion in regards to 8.1.2B, which is a report in regards to the 2-year moratorium on minor variances. The members of the public, first I have Brandon Flewelling, I'm sorry.
That is okay. Good evening, Mayor Foxton and members of council. I'm the planning consultant to Cache Developments, who have applied for the minor variance application, which initially sparked this report from staff to lift the 2-year moratorium on minor variance. We're certainly prepared to speak to the minor variance tomorrow at the Committee of Adjustment meeting, and simply wanted to inform, to say that we're here to answer any questions that you may have. And maybe just for clarification purposes, the real purpose that this application is being brought forward, which again can be discussed at the Committee of Adjustment meeting, is that a developer has developed the land and set zoning provisions in place, but now a builder is coming along and has made a deal to purchase the lots from the original developer and looking to implement their building product on the lots. And it's fairly common that, based on their units and models and so on, that requests for variance of this nature are received. So we're certainly available to answer any questions that council may have on this application now, and would get into the merits of the minor variance application at the Committee of Adjustment meeting tomorrow.
Okay, did anybody want to ask any questions to Brandon? Seeing none, thank you, Brandon. Next up, we have Marcus. Hello, Marcus.
Hi, good evening. Thank you for having me. I just want to, I'll just more so reiterate what Brandon has mentioned. He was obviously the planner on the subdivision file for Mr. Bruce, and he's also representing us, Cache Homes, on the application that's before you potentially tonight as well as tomorrow night. But I did just want to reiterate that some of the variances or amendments that we're requesting, we've implemented similar types of setbacks in Cambridge and in the Cambridge West community, which is very close. And from an urban design and architectural standpoint, we feel they're very much well received, and we're more than happy to bring them here if they're accepted, obviously. And if there's any questions you have of myself or Brandon, we're happy to answer them.
CEO McNeely.
Madam Mayor, I wish to caution council tonight is to deal with the broader context of timing of the moratorium and the relaxation of that provision to deal with any minor variance that's brought forward within the 2-year window of a site-specific amendment. The Cache Homes minor variance application on the Bruce subdivision land is the subject of a public meeting tomorrow night. It's been advertised for tomorrow night, and that's when the public who has expressed an interest in this file will be available to participate and hear the merits of that application and the context in which it's brought forward. So the report tonight is dealing with the Provincial Planning Act and the provision of a relaxation that council can deal with to allow for the consideration of minor variances, period.
So now if they, that takes care of our speakers. Now it's up, Councillor Rollerman. Yeah, you're up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So it's my understanding that in 2015, the province passed this legislation to give townships or municipalities a timeout, so that after we pass the zoning bylaw or after we pass official plan, there'd be a 2-year moratorium, so that our decisions wouldn't constantly be under attack by developers So I'm just curious why this is coming out now. Why would the township want to overstep the province here? The province has put this in place to protect us. So why would we want to remove this right now? It seems to have worked in the past. Perhaps we could look at handling on a case-by-case basis. But I think the 2-year moratorium serves a purpose, and I think that purpose has served us well up to now. So I'm just curious, maybe the CEO can answer why this is before us tonight.
So, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Rolleman, this amendment to the Planning Act was introduced by the former Liberal government. I don't know the genesis of why the government put this provision into the Planning Act, but certainly you're correct when you speak to the time frame of 2015. The moratorium does not apply exclusively to a large build development. It would apply to any site-specific amendment where relief was being sought within the 2-year period and a minor variance was being pursued. So it has nothing to do with size or scale, whether it's an individual homeowner or a development proposal like that's being entertained tomorrow night. Staff were not fully aware of the implications of the 2015 moratorium, and having it brought to our attention, prepared this report for the consideration of council. We do occasionally deal with minor variances, and as the detailed drawings of homes or home additions or the like are presented, they sometimes bump up against the zone regulations. I'll use a very simple example. Perhaps it's a pie-shaped lot, and buildings are typically rectangular in nature. You could have a small intrusion of the corner of the building that requires relief from the minor variance. And it's suggested that that would be cumbersome to go through a site-specific process to seek council relief to allow a minor variance to be considered for that kind of situation. We've also witnessed where a proponent has undertaken a site-specific amendment to allow a specific use, could be institutional, industrial, or residential in nature. They've retained professional services to actually do their building permit drawings. And once again, the site-specific standards that they crafted didn't fit the building as designed, or subsequently they made an adjustment to their building and a relief was sought to capture whatever the revision was to the building layout. It's being brought forward in part for customer service, to allow for the efficient and expeditious review of the Planning Act. There's an expectation under the Planning Act in other provisions of the section 45 that deals with minor variances that we typically, upon receipt of a complete application, bring forward an application for a public meeting within 30 days and the rendering of a decision shortly thereafter. And so one piece of the legislation fights against another aspect. So what has been presented to Township Council is a blanket to allow exemption, and the merits of individual applications would then be subject to their review as per past practice. So that's public notice, convening of a hearing, decisions by the Committee of Adjustment, and an appeal mechanism. So the removal of the moratorium in no way changes the scrutiny of a review or the merits of the individual applications. It just facilitates the ability to deal with the application if and when a minor variance application were to be pursued. Staff in the report have identified other alternatives, which would include, on a site-by-site basis, if it's triggered, bringing a report to committee, and committee then on a site-specific basis allowing for the moratorium to be removed specific to that application, and then the application being processed. But that will add, depending upon how council meeting schedules unfold, a month to two to the review process, above and beyond the traditional timing for the processing of a minor variance application. The other and final option to council is to not waive the moratorium, and then basically any application where relief is sought from a zone standard that was the subject of a site-specific amendment, all applications are going to be held in that moratorium, and that request would be delayed for whatever the residual time period would be. Staff have recommended the blanket exemption so that all applications can be processed and then undergo the scrutiny of that individual application consistent with Section 45 of the Planning Act.
Councillor Williman.
So thank you, Madam Mayor, through you to the CAO. But just for clarification, the moratorium does not preclude the township or the township staff from bringing forward changes to the act, to the official plan, or to this, in this case, the zoning amendments that we're looking for. It's only private individuals or corporations that want to change the agreement. They can't come forward on the moratorium, but if there's something our staff felt was important to change, that could still be changed. That's my understanding of reading over the 2015 Act.
Yes, most minor variances, however, are triggered by corporations or private individuals or agents acting on their behalf. Very rarely would we, for lack of a better term, sponsor a minor variance unless it really had to deal with one of our own properties, and for whatever reason, we bumped up against the rigidity of the zoning standards, and there was a site-specific amendment within a 2-year period prior. But almost exclusively, minor variance applications are triggered by private individuals, corporations, and or agents acting on behalf of private individuals or agents or corporations.
Continue, Councillor Williman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My only concern, and this is something I think council has to think about, is, you know, when we allow these changes to happen, these minor changes to happen, we've all been there where people say, why did council allow that to happen? Why did council allow people to have a small driveway with a sidewalk through it? Why did council allow, you know, parking on both sides of the street? Why did council do this and council do that? And ultimately, it's because staff made those changes and council of the day may not have been aware of those changes. The province put that in place so that this would stop happening. We as a council made the choice to sit as our own committee of adjustment so that we have better control over these changes. And so that when people in the community say to us, why did you allow this to happen? We can say, well, we actually had a chance to look at it, to think about it, to have a debate about it, and to make a decision, as opposed to, oh, somebody in our staff changed it and we weren't aware. That's not really a great answer. I prefer to be able to say to people, we had a vigorous debate at council or a committee of adjustment, and this decision council made and I stand behind it, as opposed to being caught off guard by a decision that staff have made. That's why I would much rather be in favor of either continuing the moratorium or only considering it on a case-by-case basis.
CEO McNeely.
Well, Madam Mayor, those are all options that are available to council. As I mentioned, if council wishes to do it on a case-by-case basis, then I would ask that council provide that direction to staff. And then going forward, if circumstances arise, we would actually have to bring forward an independent and separate report that in no way speaks to the merits of the planning application. It would just speak to, can we, in this example, have permission to convene a public meeting to deal with the minor variance application? It just, in staff's mind, creates a delay and will frustrate any range of minor variances that are being sought by individuals or in time, potentially the building community.
Councillor Austin, it's your turn.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So just so I understand what this basically how this will change. Like my concern is, for example, we have a developer comes in, buys a a piece of property, creates the building lots. Now they try, and obvious reasons, they're trying to maximize the amount of building lots they can get on that property. So they come to us as one development's coming tomorrow for a minor variance on the property. Okay, so if they get if we say that we accept the minor variance on the property, now we have a builder comes in, wants to build a house. They want to maximize the size of house that's on that property, so they come in for a minor variance because they're either too close to the property line or too close to the adjacent homes. So this is where I'm concerned about not having that watch, because I don't want to start cramming all these places in and putting, we have bylaws for a reason, and I don't want to see oversized homes going undersized lots because we've approved minor variances.
So
Gail
Madam Mayor,
McNeely, go ahead.
if I can, back to Councillor Ostner. The report that's before council this evening in no way speaks to the merits of a minor variance application. That is its own separate process. If council enacts the staff report tonight as proposed, it just gives staff the permission to process and receive those applications and start the process of public and agency consultation, preparation of a report that's submitted to a public hearing, and a decision made by the committee based on the merits of the application. So that's what the purpose of tomorrow night's meeting is, if I look at the Cache Homes development proposal in isolation. So the consideration of tonight's report in no way prejudges or renders a decision on the merits of minor variance application A08/20. That's its own process. It's independent of tonight's report, and it will be reviewed and assessed by the committee on its own merits. Tonight's report is exclusively allowing us to deal with applications that are within the 2-year window of time following the enactment of a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment.
Councillor Ostner.
So then how does this make us more efficient, or how does this benefit the township by enacting what the staff report's recommending?
So I'll use an example. The 2-year period has just elapsed, but I'll use the example. We established in 2018 amendments to the zoning bylaw that brought in specific provisions related to parking, size of garage, and the ability to park a car in the garage, and other ancillary activities. That was in response to concerns that have been expressed by council members of the public. So council brought forward site-specific amendments to the zoning bylaw to respond to that element or those elements. If someone, a homeowner, had been looking at an addition to their home and they couldn't meet the provisions because of one or more of the restrictions that we imposed, they would have had the ability to apply to the township for a minor variance to seek relief from one or more of those provisions. If the moratorium was in place, we would not be able to move forward with that application. So either that person would have had to wait whatever the residual period of time was until the 2-year moratorium had elapsed, or we would have, through on an individual case-by-case basis, brought forward a report to Township Council saying, Township Council, we've received a minor variance application for 123 Ontario Street, and they seek relief from the moratorium so that their minor variance application could be dealt with. If council then says, yes, we'll hear that application, then we would have started the minor variance process in terms of taking in the application, consulting with the government agencies, advising the public of the application, the hearing, and a decision. All I'm saying is we would have added another month or two to the overall process. And that could affect someone's construction schedule. It's an extra delay in terms of maybe the trades that they've set up or the securing of materials associated with the project, whatever the case may be. So there's an impact on customer service. And that's what we're saying is let the application be the subject of its own scrutiny, not whether or not they're one side or the other of a 2-year arbitrary period of time.
Councillor Austin.
Well, for clarification, this is on new developments, right?
No, it could be an existing neighborhood if there was a site-specific amendment applicable to it. It has nothing to do with greenfield development. It is any site-specific zoning amendment that could affect residential, institutional, industrial type land use activities.
Anything else, Councillor Austin? Councillor McCreary and then Councillor Overman.
Thank you, Mayor Foxton. I think that this 2-year moratorium is not a desirable planning legislation, or it's got some merit. And there's reason for it to be there. It is actually in the Planning Act, and I'm concerned about quickly voluntarily giving up the protection that moratorium gives us. I think that in most often this type of thing is going to come up with a subdivision, and when you have a case where the subdivision design is been put forward, the bylaw has been written, council thinks it's complete, but then council could be subjected to kind of a barrage of minor variances related to that subdivision, which could significantly alter the look and feel and quality of the subdivision if we didn't have this moratorium. And I might be willing to look at a sort of a case-by-case issue if we had something that came up that was sort of an administrative problem or an error, but I wouldn't want to see just a constant barrage of minor variances coming up for a subdivision bylaw that's been finalized and negotiated, and we think it's set to go, and find out that no, it's going to change a number of times. Thanks.
And Councillor Rollman, you were next.
Madam Mayor, my question is once again to the CAO. And this has been enacted for about 6 years now. Over the past 6 years, how many other cases have come forward where we've had to deal with this before the 2-year moratorium? It hasn't been a problem in the past. So I'm still curious why this is a problem now. It's been in place for 6 years. We've dealt with it handily in the past by having, committee of adjustment meetings. So I'm just wondering, why do we need to change something that appears to be working? At the very least, we could continue to look at it a case-by-case basis.
So Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Rollman, off the top of my head, I cannot recall how many or what those specific circumstances are. I have not done that research to track each minor variance application and see whether one or more bumped up against that 2-year moratorium.
I see no other questions or comments. Councilors, thank you very much for your discussion. Thank you, CEO McNeely, for giving all the options and giving us the full information so that we can make a good decision. If there are no further questions, then the resolution, please.
So moved by Councillor Rollman and seconded by Councillor McCreary that report number PD-08-2021 be received, and that the Township allow for the processing and consideration of all minor variance applications submitted before the 2nd anniversary of the approval date of which the general zoning bylaw was amended in accordance with section 45, subsection 1.4 of the Planning Act. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
No.
Councillor Rollman?
Opposed.
Councillor Oster?
No.
Councillor McCreary?
No.
Councillor Gillespie?
No.
Okay, that fails. That has been lost, I should say.
CEO McNeely.
Madam Mayor, would council consider an alternate resolution recognizing the vote that was just taken on the staff recommendation to allow on a site-specific basis the consideration of application A0820, which is the subject of the public hearing tomorrow night before the Committee of Adjustment, to proceed forward and allow for the Committee of Adjustment to hear the merits of that application.
Council, would you consider it? First, Councillor Rowland, then Councillor Austin.
Just for clarification, Madam Mayor, is the CEO saying that we're going to put in place a policy to deal with this in the future, or is he asking us specifically about the development for tomorrow night?
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Rowland, I'm asking council to consider a motion this evening as an alternative to what was put forward in the staff report. So one of the alternatives would that be that council on a case-by-case basis would make a decision on the merits of hearing applications. Tomorrow night, on Tuesday, January the 19th, minor variance application 08/20 is being considered, has been scheduled with notice given for that minor variance application. If council tonight would entertain a motion to allow that application to continue forward for tomorrow night, and with that then Committee of Adjustment would then hear the merits of that application, hear from the members of public that have either written in or registered to speak, and then would be in a position to deal with that minor variance application on its merits.
So, Ms. Sage, did you get basically the motion that CEO McNeely is asking about, recommending?
Yes, I believe I have a draft, if I can read it, and if you guys would like to make any changes to it. Sorry.
Sorry, can I ask my question before we go ahead and vote on anything? Okay, my suggestion would be to introduce another motion for option B to permit applications on a case-to-case basis.
That's exactly what CEO McNeely said.
Well, he was saying site specific for the application tomorrow. I'm just saying option B in general moving forward.
Councillor Rowland.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. But further to the comments made by Councilor McCreary, how do we prevent this from turning into a barrage of minor variances? We don't want to be meeting every week for special meetings to talk about special cases for minor variances. So I just want to make sure that the language is set up in such a way that it's not going to turn into a nightmare for us and backfire, and we'll have hundreds of hours of meetings about minor variances.
CEO McNeely.
So, Madam Mayor, the framework in which I presented as the alternative motion was specific to the application that's been filed by Cache Homes and is the subject of a public hearing before the Committee of Adjustment tomorrow. So it was narrow in its focus. It would allow that file to be considered tomorrow night and for the Committee of Adjustment to deal with it. Councillor Osner, in parallel, was looking at alternative B, which would require staff each time a minor variance application that bumps up against the 2-year moratorium. If it was to be adopted, we would have to bring a staff report seeking relief from that provision of the Planning Act to allow for the receipt and processing of the application. So they're slightly different in their focus. I'm asking through the resolution that I highly framed, not specific language, that tomorrow night we have the ability to continue forward and deal with application A08-20 and allow that application to be considered tomorrow night by the Committee of Adjustment, given that notice has been given. We know that we have people from the community have both written in and wish to speak to the merits of the application.
So I understand the difference, and if I may paraphrase, is that if we went with straight Plan B, as Councillor Osner stated, then we would be in the situation that Councillor Rowland was suggesting may happen, which would be a barrage of applications. Whereas if we go with your motion, it's specific to this situation only, and the moratorium would still be in place to prevent that barrage of happening. Is that correct?
That's correct. I mean, I have no idea how many applications in the future would be within that 2-year moratorium period. However, yes, Madam Mayor, you're correct. The motion that I framed was specific to this minor variance application, allowing it to be heard by the committee tomorrow night. So it's a site-specific request dealing with a site-specific application.
Councillor Rossner.
So just a quick question on the moratorium as it stands if we don't do a case-to-case basis. Let's say somebody moves into a new home in a new development or any other development, for example, and decides they want to put a pool, a deck, a shed or something in and need a minor variance. You're saying that they wouldn't be able to put that shed up for 2 years?
If there was a site-specific amendment that affected that property or that classification of properties, then if they could not meet those provisions, yes, that individual homeowner would have to ask council to release the moratorium so that on a site-specific basis, that minor variance request could be dealt with.
Councillor Rossner.
Are there many? Are there a lot of properties that have site-specific conditions on them where they'd have to be in that position, or is that one in 1,000?
So, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor Rossner, we typically don't deal with a lot of minor variance requests. Depending upon the strength of the economy, if I think about the last 3 or 4 years, it's been anywhere from 5 to 12 or so applications, or there's about. So it's not, we haven't received a lot. How many of those would have been within a 2-year site-specific moratorium? I don't know. But conceivably, could it happen? Yes. But it's not a barrage. It's not a significant number, regardless. But we do deal with a lot of site-specific zoning bylaw amendments, just given the fact that we're dealing with a 1983 era bylaw. And so sometimes to allow certain activities to occur on a property, right down to an individual residential site, through to a large scale greenfield subdivision, we do a number of site-specific zoning amendments or provisions to clean up zoning standards to bring them to the current time period.
Council, I want you to remember that a lot of people are concerned about this, and they're expecting to speak or listen tomorrow night. And if we don't do as CEO McNeely states, then that won't go forward tomorrow night. And these people will be frustrated by our lack of communication to them. And that's my only concern. Councilor Rollerman, you had your hand up.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. No, I do agree with your comments, Madam Mayor. My only concern is, do we need to have something in place for all situations as opposed to showing, let's say, I don't know, favoritism towards this one particular application? I'm concerned that if we say we're going to enforce the moratorium, not change it, but we'll allow this one case to go through, that also opens us up for criticism. I think we're better off to do as Councillor Oster suggested, put in a plan B that deals with a case-by-case basis. If the CAO is correct, it's 5 to 12 times a year. That's not a whole lot. And that way we have a policy that is fair and equitable to everybody that comes before us, not just towards this one group. That's my only caution, is that we seem to be favoring this one application.
Councilor McCreary.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't think as a council we need to be concerned about frustrating people by not having the ability to come and speak tomorrow on this issue, because the members of the public that have submitted comments, they're opposed to the minor variance. So if the minor variance isn't allowed to go through at all, I mean, that's actually the result that they are looking for. So not being able to speak tomorrow night won't in fact frustrate them. I think they might actually be pleased.
That's if they know, but how do they know? A lot of people will not be watching tonight. And notices were sent around to the neighborhoods, getting people, because I got calls from people about this issue. And so how do we, because the Air News is not out till Wednesday for me, and it's already gone to print. And also, how do they publicly become aware? And Facebook or Twitter always isn't a viable, reliable option. So that's my concern there. CEO McNeely.
Madam Mayor, to respond to Councillor Rowland and his stated concern as a more go forward. So an option would be to allow the consideration of application A08-20 tomorrow night as scheduled for the Committee of Adjustment on Tuesday, January the 19th. And that staff at the next Development Services Committee meeting, which is, I believe, on February the 8th, bring forward a draft policy for Council's consideration as to how future requests related to minor variances that trigger the 2-year moratorium provision will be addressed, and what lens would be viewed in the consideration of those items as a go forward.
I see Councillor Roman shaking his head yes. Councillor McCreary.
I think I kind of agree with Councillor Rowland about us showing favoritism to this one minor variance application, because right now, as we sit here right this very moment, we have a 2-year moratorium. So therefore, there shouldn't be any minor variances going forward. So why would we just say, okay, we're just going to allow this one? We can't. We have a 2-year moratorium. It's not a valid minor variance.
CEO McNeely.
So my only comment would be, until council sees that go forward policy strategy as a draft and debates it, there may be certain types of applications that are exempted and others that are subject to the moratorium, because council can place conditions on what that looks like. Staff have not turned their mind to that, and that's why I'd like to bring it before the December 8th meeting for council to review, and then council can have that discussion and adopt whatever the go forward policy is. There's been an expenditure of time and effort related to the minor variance application filed by Cachet, and I'm asking that council allow that to be considered tomorrow night. The merits of the application on a planning basis would then be reviewed by the Committee of Adjustment. And if the committee is so inclined tomorrow night, they would be rendering a decision. If committee tomorrow night feels more information is required to support the minor variance application, they can defer a decision and seek whatever that additional information is to allow for an informed decision. But to allow the committee to deal with the application as presented and then assess the merits based on its planning credentials.
Councillor Roman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I guess the concern that I have as a member of council is if we overrule the moratorium, allow this to go forward tomorrow night and address the concerns of the citizens, and then we decide that we want to support our citizens and not allow the minor variances that are being requested, have we now opened ourselves up to a situation where we can be taken before the LPAT and have our decisions challenged, as opposed to if we just continue to enforce the moratorium, this will have to wait until the 2-year period is up.
So Madam Mayor, any decision rendered by the Committee of Adjustment, if the application proceeds forward as presently scheduled, would be subject to appeal rights by any individual that has participated in the planning process.
Councillor McCreary.
So then, am I right to say that if this minor variance were stopped tonight, it would be stopped under the provisions of the Planning Act, and that would be the end of it? There could be no LPAT appeal from the decision made by council tonight.
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor McCreary, as it pertains to the moratorium,
to CA McNeely through the mayor, but are you saying that there could be an LPAT appeal related to this minor variance at this point, like right now? If we didn't hear it tomorrow, it would stop right now, or there would be one based on what we've done tonight?
Madam Mayor, through to Councillor McCreary, council is not sitting as the Committee of Adjustment tonight. That is tomorrow. The application itself is being dealt with conceivably tomorrow. And so the item before council tonight is exclusively the applicability of the moratorium on site-specific amendments. And that aspect is not appealable to the LPAT.
Okay, CEO McNeely, to be very clear, so we have turned down the motion, and so the moratorium stands. We're not waiving it.
If council takes no further action, then staff cannot proceed forward with the minor variance application A008/20 tomorrow night. And we would have to advise anyone who signs on to tomorrow night's virtual meeting that the application has been held in abeyance pending either a withdrawal and or the provision of 2 years from the date of the passage of the site-specific amendment for that subdivision, which will be later this calendar year.
All right. Councilors, your wish. Do we wish to do another motion, or do we wish to leave it as is? I think I was hearing leave it as is, but I'm not positive. Will we allow, Council, will you allow Marcus to speak? I have to have Council's permission to allow Marcus to speak. Councilor Rolman, do you mind if Marcus speaks? You allow it? Councilor McCreary?
Yes.
Councilor Gillespie? And Councilor Ossner?
Well, council has made the vote to keep the moratorium. Is there any information that come forward to make us go back on that vote? Or
Already voted. We'd have to take the mover and seconder would have to say they reopen the vote, and we would have to reinitiate the vote. But Marcus has asked to speak, and I'm asking how would you allow him to speak?
so if we reopen the vote, then what we're saying is that
No one has asked us to reopen the vote. He has asked if he can speak.
well, the rest of the council said yes, so sure.
Go ahead, Marcus.
Thank you, Mayor. Much appreciated. And thank you, councilors. I just want to make sure that I understand exactly what council has voted on. Firstly, I believe there was 3 options on the table presented by staff. There was an option A, and there was an option B, which was on a case-by-case basis. And then there was option C, which was just not to permit any applications to go forward. One of the topics that was discussed at the beginning of this discussion was kind of the genesis of the moratorium from the Planning Act. And maybe my planner Brandon can jump in, but if I'm not mistaken, the genesis of the moratorium for minor variances on site-specific amendments was brought forward by developers seeking additional density and additional height and additional permissions relating to density in units after they had sought out approval. And what that was really triggered by, and I worked very closely with some of the provincial members, was high-rise or medium density developers would get permissions for a high-rise development, let's say 30 stories or 40 stories in height. And what they would do afterwards was go to the Committee of Adjustment almost immediately after getting approval and seek an additional 6 meters or 7 meters of height, which would automatically add 3 or 4 stories of height to an already tall building. So that's where the genesis of the moratorium kind of stems from. So what we're asking for, and I realize I'm asking a lot here on a case-by-case basis, is we're asking to simply present the planning merits of really 2 variances. And I know Mr. McNeely didn't want to get into it this evening, but just at a high level, we're seeking 2 variances for tomorrow evening on a subdivision that we weren't really involved in because, obviously Mr. Bruce was the developer. So we're not adding any additional density. We're not changing any of the lot frontages that were permitted through the site-specific bylaw that Mr. Bruce wrote and had approved. And really the number of units and number of houses that were already permitted through draft approval in that subdivision will ultimately stay the same. The variances that we are seeking are for a side yard setback and for a setback between 2 townhouse blocks, none of which will change the density in the subdivision, none of which will change the number of units in a subdivision. And at the same time, while Mr. Bruce is working through his detailed engineering with Mr. McNeely's staff, there are several mechanisms that are still in play for the town. Number one being the decision of a committee of adjustment, if we could vote on it tonight, to be heard tomorrow night. Number 2 is architectural control guidelines that still need to be written and approved by Mr. McNeely's staff. And the third would obviously be compliance with those architectural control guidelines, as well as control through the conditions of approval that have been recommended by Mr. McNeely's staff. So there's still several mechanisms that would be in play for council and staff should this application be heard tomorrow evening and allowed to move forward. So I just wanted to make sure that was all very clear. The second thing Councillor Ostner asked was if a new homeowner purchased a house in a subdivision, would they have to seek a variance for a shed or a deck? Well, more often than not, when these bylaws are written, the time that it takes from getting approval of a zoning bylaw amendment and the decisions rendered to the time that we put shovels in the ground and to the time that the home is built is normally 2 years. So any homeowner that's moving in is usually moving in after the moratorium is passed. So to answer your question to the Councillor Ostner, more often than not, they would not be subject to that moratorium, and that 2 years had likely passed already. To conclude, I would really appreciate council to reconsider option B, if it's at all possible at this point, based on the fact that, number one, we're not increasing or decreasing lot frontage. We're not increasing the number of units in the subdivision. The density of the subdivision is ultimately going to stay the same, regardless of the decision of the Committee of Adjustment tomorrow evening. And with that, I guess I'll leave that to you, Ms. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilors, is there any further comments? Councilor Rowland.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I guess I'm just trying to wrap my head around this. So for clarification, perhaps the CEO can explain, but if there's a design flaw in this subdivision that Marcus has pointed out, that he wasn't involved in making this subdivision, it was Bruce that set it up. If there's an inherent design flaw that our staff identifies and our staff want council or a committee of adjustment to look at those design flaws, that would be allowed under the moratorium, if I'm correct. So we could still maintain the moratorium, and if the planning staff feels that the subdivision has a flaw that needs to be addressed, wouldn't that be allowed under the current legislation?
So, Madam Mayor, through to Councilor Rowland, I wouldn't suggest that the zone standard is a design flaw. Cache Homes slightly designs their homes different in terms of the provision of on smaller lots, the ability to secure 2-bay garage, and or on the wider product, the 12-meter type lot or greater, that's 40 feet. It allows for marginally wider exterior elements to create a more engaging and animated front entry with more window space for the interior portions of the home. So it's more of a design preference versus a design flaw. However, if staff found a fundamental problem with our zone standards, if it's not deemed to be a typographical error, then we would actually have to follow the Planning Act. And depending upon the nature of the issue, it would either have to be through a zoning amendment and or a variance. Typically, we'd actually go and clean up the zone standard because it applies typically to more than one lot. Then it would apply to the whole hierarchy of lots within that given development. And so the zone standard would be more appropriate if it were to be sponsored by the municipality.
So Councillor Osner.
So again, talking about what we should be talking about tomorrow night, to me, looking at it, it looks like that it's an oversized home being put on a lot. So they're seeking relief to go from 1.2 meters down to 0.6 meters. That's cutting it in half, and that's stacking the roof lines pretty close together, is it not?
So, Madam Mayor, I mean, as I said, this is all part of a discussion at a public hearing because everyone needs to hear how the home by its physical massing is redesigned so that the eaves are dealt with so that they're not touching or overhanging or whatever. What is before council tonight is, will you allow this site-specific application, which bumps up against the 2-year moratorium, will you allow it to be heard tomorrow night? So council's already, as a blanket, said that you will not entertain the waiving of the moratorium. So the alternative, which was at a high level flagged a few moments ago, was to allow this individual application to proceed forward tomorrow night, and that on December the 8th, sorry, on February the 8th, staff would return with a policy to deal with similar requests that may arise in the future.
So councillors, I'm asking you, are we going to allow it to go forward tomorrow night? Yes or no? Councillor McCreary.
I say no, because we have to follow the Planning Act, and under the Planning Act, its minor variance can't be brought forward at this time.
Okay, so you say no. Councillor Rollman.
I say no.
Councillor Gillespie.
I'm super confused on this whole thing, but I would say no.
And Councillor Osner.
I think if we kept the moratorium, we got to keep the moratorium. You know, we can't kind of keep the moratorium. We either keep the moratorium or we vote on a separate option, and the rest of council does not want to do that. So unfortunately, this is what we voted, and we go by those rules.
Okay, thank you, Council, and Brandon and Marcus. I wish you luck, but as it stands right now, I assume CO McNeely that the report for tomorrow night will not be coming forward.
So, Madam Mayor, in the morning, the clerk will issue an addendum advising that council did not waive the applicable provision from section 45 of the Planning Act to allow the consideration of the application. And so it cannot proceed forward because the Committee of Adjustment is a separate body to council. The provision to allow for the moratorium, or the waiving of the moratorium, I apologize, is exclusively within the domain of council, not the committee. So if council enacts that, then the committee by inference has to follow the direction of council.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. So there's no further motion. We're going to go on to item C. Councilor McCreary, you wanted to speak on this? Is the Cedar Creek Road one?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just had a question about the changes in the drainage pattern for this subdivision. Like initially, it was going to be drained from, I think, the northwest corner. The whole subdivision is going to be drained into a stormwater management plan in the northwest corner. And now we see each individual lot is going to be drained separately, and the road is going to be drained into a stormwater management plan I'm just sort of wondering why all this came about and how this new drainage plan is going to work.
CEO McNeely.
So, Madam Mayor, Council may recall that initially we were looking at the potential to retire the township's existing stormwater management pond that's situated outside of the plan of subdivision but adjacent, and then looking at creating a combined facility to deal with both the historic stormwater flows that came off of Wayneless Court as well as whatever was generated in the subdivision. So the owner continued to refine their analysis, and obviously it's in everyone's best interest to create as efficient a land use hierarchy as possible, and taking advantage of the very granular nature of this site. We know that we can create high infiltration opportunities. We have large lots that are 20 plus acres or 8 hectares in size. So typically there's ample space to promote on-site infiltration. So they've leveraged the ability to promote on-site infiltration. And obviously, as each site plan comes forward with the individual development applications on lots 1 to 3, that will be a requirement. It'll be truthed out and implemented through the site plan process. So really what we're looking at exclusively then is the roadside drainage. We're looking at predominantly open ditch systems where we can promote infiltration within the roadside ditch. And really the storm pond itself is to deal with those significant flows that occasionally occur, and it's added as a storage area where infiltration is promoted. If I look at the Wayneless Court pond, it doesn't get that much directional flow, and I would expect the same would occur for this proposed site. In terms of why did it move to the left side to the right side of the property along the northern boundary? Once again, having it adjacent to the township's existing facility is advantageous because it allows we as a municipality easy access to maintain both facilities through one common corridor coming off of Street 1. So the relocation, if we weren't able to do a consolidation, the relocation adjacent our existing facility is appropriate and has advantages to us as a corporation. The fact that it's smaller allows for larger footprint development for employment-related purposes, and so that's an efficient use of land, taking advantage of the overriding characteristics of this land holding, that being a former gravel pit that has tremendous opportunity for infiltration.
Okay, thank you. And one more question about this new plan. We have this undersized lot, lot number 4, and I guess we're going to see that lot line moved at some point. When are we going to expect to see that moved? Because right now that lot's too small according to the bylaw.
So, Madam Mayor, through to Councillor McCreary, we've captured that lot that's to be added and merged in title with the Teco Block property to the south in 2 fashions. One, we put on a holding condition on the zones that requires 2 items to occur. One, obviously, is the release of the aggregate license issued by the Ministry of Natural Resources. And the second is that it be merged in title with the property to the south, to be taken into the whole title of that property to the south. So no development can occur on that property in the absence of those 2 conditions being cleared. We've also, as a condition to draft plan approval, provided direction that through either the subdivision approval process and or a lot line adjustment administered through the Committee of Adjustment, that undersized lot be added in title and merged with the existing property to the south. So we've used 2 separate mechanisms to ensure that it will not remain as a separate standalone undersized lot. We cannot clear the conditions to draft approval until that property is moved and through one mechanism or another, transferred and conveyed in title as part of a merged enlarged property to the south. So I'm satisfied we've got the controls. It's in everyone's best interest that that lot line adjustment or merger of the property to the south occur, because it facilitates the second phase of the Techo Block proposal. And we're aware that the two owners, Techo Block and Millgate Holdings, have got a paper agreement between them to facilitate the transfer of the property so that Techo Block in the longer term can pursue their second phase. That will add obviously a second building or building complexes, as well as additional employment and assessment through that lot line adjustment, transfer of land, and once again strengthens the economic portfolio going forward for Techo Block to have a dominant presence in the Southwest Ontario marketplace, as well as the Northeast United States.
Any other questions?
Thank you.
Councillor Rollerman.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to follow up and see if there's been any discussion about left turn lanes there. I know that when you're heading eastbound on Cedar Creek Road, especially in the morning, there's a lot of traffic trying to access the 401 towards London, and a lot of traffic going straight through. If we add in cars making a left-hand turn or vehicles making a left-hand turn northbound into that new subdivision, has there been any discussion about a left turn lane, a dedicated left turn lane there, to try and alleviate traffic, or maybe a dedicated right turn lane onto the 401? Because I know right now, as you go up the hill, it is two lanes at the bottom of the hill by Unilock. Then it becomes one lane, and then it kind of goes back to being two lanes. There's a lot of confusion there. So I wonder if there's any discussion about realigning all those lanes, maybe at the intersection having a left turn lane, a straight through lane, and a right turn lane to the 401.
So, Madam Mayor, I'm going to let Chris speak to it in a moment. I'm not aware about a dedicated right turn for the, I guess it'd be the eastbound traffic that currently climbs the hill and approaches the signal to go onto what would be effectively the westbound on-ramp onto the 401. Certainly, there's lots of asphalt pavement there today, but the line markings do not promote at this present time that dedicated right turn. But I'll let Chris speak to.
CM McNeely, if I can just for a minute, there is a dedicated right turn lane there going onto the London line. So you come out of the old Volvo truck station, and they have a right turn for their trucks, and it's marking, so it's two lanes going down. And then that disappears, but it doesn't really disappear, and then it turns into a right turn lane to London. So instead of it having this disappear for 2 seconds, they should just do it right turn all the way.
So there was a traffic impact study that was done that was reviewed by both the region, because it's a regional road. It's Regional Road 97. We refer to it as Cedar Creek Road, but it is a regional road, as well as the Ministry of Transportation. So both road authorities, because the ministry has jurisdictional control within 800 meters of its intersection, they have both signed off on the initial work done as part of the analysis attributed to traffic generated by this development and how that relates to the approach and or the intersection at the 401 Cedar Creek traffic signal. And that will be brought to life, for lack of a better term, through both agreements with the province, because if there's off-site improvements required to the road system, they will have a parallel agreement with the developer to undertake those capital improvements. And we also have an interim condition with the Techo Block property utilizing the Millgate property for temporary access until Street 1 is actually built as a public highway, providing in the longer term access to the interior. So the ministry's been active in this, but I'll let Chris speak to the specific intersection improvements that are required by the ministry in the longer term.
Welcome, Chris.
Thank you, Mayor Foxton, members of council. I'm just looking at good old Google Earth, And there is actually a 4-lane cross section, so west of the ramp. So there's a westbound straight through lane. There's actually a left turn lane already in place into the site, a straight through lane, so heading eastbound, and a right, and you're quite right, Mayor, a right hand turn lane for the ramp to access the 401 London bound. And then on the other side, there's a left turn lane already in place and a straight through lane, and of course, in both directions. However, we are working with the MTO. We do have regional sign off, and MTO is currently working with us on, we call it a functional design. So the functional design sets out, for example, length of tapers, and it's subject to traffic volumes to determine, are the tapers long enough, or do they interfere with straight through traffic, for example. So that's being reviewed, and that will be a part of the construction design for the Millgate subdivision and the municipal road allowance, as CAO McNeely's indicated.
Thank you. Is there any further questions? Can I have the motion, please, then? You do not have to read it all. Ms. Sage, you can just do as presented.
All right, certainly. So moved by Councillor Gillespie and seconded by Councillor Rollman that report number PD-11-2021 be received and as presented with Mayor Foxton's permission, as presented in the staff report. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rollman?
Councillor Rowland, you're muted.
Yes.
Councillor Osner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night. And next we have, there's nothing on the community services, nothing on the governance. So I'm asking the members of council if they'd like to speak on any of the reports. One is the accessibility report, the other is the attendance report. Seeing no comments there, then can I have the motion, please?
I had a question, Madam Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that. See, Councilor Rowland.
I wanted to ask a question about the attendance report.
Okay, so we'll pull that one and we will move the motion for the accessibility report. So if you'd like to read the motion for the accessibility report, please.
Certainly. So moved by Councillor Rollman, seconded by Councillor McCreary that report CLK-01-2021 be received and that council adopt the 2020 annual accessibility status report. Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rollman?
Yes.
Councillor Osner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. And Councilor Rulerman, your discussion, your comment.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just curious as to why we're broadening the definition of council meetings. I know initially we had said that it was our regular council meetings. Now we're looking at adding all kinds of special council meetings, combined council meetings, public meetings. You know, I'm just curious, why are we changing this all around right now? Perhaps Ashley has an answer.
Yeah, so I was recommending that council expand the definition. So currently the policy covers committee of the whole, regular council and public planning meetings only. Earlier last year, council amended their procedural bylaw. So typically what would be our, if you recall, when we used to have our one meeting a month in January, July, August, and December, we would issue 2 agendas, which would be committee of the whole and then regular council. So that's not the case anymore. We issue 1 agenda and that's not covered in the policy now. So those meetings wouldn't be covered off under your current definition. And in addition, I did include special meetings just because 2020 was a very unique year where there were a lot of special meetings that were called and a lot of meetings that were canceled. So if council would want the policy to include those meetings, if not, we can keep it as is and keep special meetings out, but there would be a number of meetings that wouldn't be included in the attendance report for 2020. And that was also the case for the joint meeting, just because again, it was a special year where there were a number of joint meetings called as well. So that's why I was recommending that the policy do be amended to include those meetings, but it's up to council if they'd like to amend the policy or not.
Do you want to discuss this now, council, or do you want to wait till the next council meeting to discuss the change in the policy? Councillor Austin.
Maybe we should discuss now because, you know, the original essence of this, you know, us creating this was for certain reasons previously on council and stuff. And now when we're adding other meetings, like joint meetings with council and stuff like that, you know, now you're broadening it, and I'm not so sure that the essence of the bylaw, or what you may call it, it needs to reflect those sorts of meetings. I'm just, because now you're opening up to whenever you have a meeting, like for example, if you couldn't have made a special meeting that was called a week before it's happening, and you know, that's a tick against you type thing. So I don't know. I see what the rest of council feels about it.
Councillor Gillespie, what do you think?
I have no problem at having recording all the meetings. I don't see that it's a problem doing that myself. I guess if you're not able to go, you're not able to go. That's all.
CEO McNeely.
So, Madam Mayor, the one expansion to the definition really is a housekeeping matter. So, for example, tonight is a combined agenda of both regular council and committee of the whole. As Ms. Sage indicated, historically, we would have issued you 2 separate agendas for tonight. Based on the amendments to the procedural bylaw that council adopted earlier in 2020, we now have it as one combined agenda. So it's not an additional meeting, it's just the context in which the meeting's called and the content of the agenda being one document. So, you know, that aspect doesn't represent an expansion of the meetings. It's just the classification of how a meeting is convened. Certainly, special meetings of council. So, for example, in 2020 and in the early, we've had, you know, joint meetings with our friends in the city of Cambridge. We had joint meetings with the councils for the rural townships when we were dealing with the service delivery review. Those are typically platooned in on occasional basis and would represent truly an expansion of the definition that we've historically used to track the attendance of members of council. Typically, those meetings are also on shorter notices, because as information becomes available or an issue is presented, those meetings are called typically with, you know, a week or so notice. Whereas meetings like tonight form part of our approved meeting schedule and are published months in advance. And that's sort of how I would differentiate them.
Councillor Austin.
So as an example, excuse me, as an example, if one of the councillors were on a vacation, we happen to have 2 meetings that week, and then Cambridge called a special meeting also that week. Well, we have, how is it written? If you meet, so if you are absent so many meetings in a row, you're docked a certain amount of pay. So, you know, like that's why I'm saying these emergency meetings or whatever that are called on by Cambridge, these joint meetings and that, they could throw a loop into somebody's vacation when previously we get our schedule set ahead of time and say, okay, well, you know, I happen to be away that week. Okay, I'm going to miss 2 meetings, but you know, that's just the way it is. And then if they a week ahead throw another meeting in there, I believe we said if you miss 3 meetings, you're penalized. Is that correct?
I don't recall. Ms. Sage?
Yeah, I'm just pulling up the bylaw now. There was a clause in it that if there was I believe it was 3 council meetings in a row, is that there would be a reduction in pay going forward. That's why the change in pay from being paid in advance to being paid retroactive. So at the end of the month.
So 3 in a row, and there would never be 3 council meetings in a week. There would be maybe a council meeting and a special meeting, but 3 council meetings in a row. So you would have to miss probably 3 months then.
Yeah,
Councilor
if I
Austin.
So as an example, this week is a perfect week because last week we called a special meeting for Thursday. If I or any other counselor was away, now we got 3 meetings in a row because you're missing today, you're missing tomorrow, you're missing Thursday.
No, special meeting doesn't count as a council meeting.
Well, according to this new
Ms. Sage, go
adjustment, it
ahead.
does.
Ms. Sage.
Oh, if I could just point out, so in the staff report under the background, so the beginning part does speak to the remuneration portion, and that was actually a separate bylaw that council adopted. And the bylaw does state that bylaw, and with regards to with pay, that is with regards to regular council meetings, committee of the whole, and public planning meetings. So it does specify that in that bylaw that was passed.
So
Just to point that out.
you wouldn't be able to hit 3 in a week.
Sorry, and just to clarify, it is 6 consecutive absences
Oh, 6, okay.
from regularly scheduled meetings.
Do you know, there is nothing wrong with having an absence or a few absences. And it's a commonplace at regional council. And we call the roll. The roll is called and documented every time we get together, and councilors miss. Because this is a part-time job. It's classified as part-time job. So people don't expect you to be there 100% of the time. And if you're there 90% of the time, which all of you are, if not more, I think that's fine. Councilor Austin.
First of all, I don't understand why we need it. Second of all, I don't know why we need to change it. Because I mean, you can pop on a meeting for 5 minutes and then turn around and leave via teleconference, and that counts as attendance at that meeting. So it's like, I mean, it doesn't have a lot of meat to it anyway. So it's just my opinion.
Is that true, Ms. Sage? Is that true that you can pop off for 5 minutes? Because that's one of the reasons we did this, was to get rid of that.
Yes, so we, the township did seek an opinion on terms of interpretation into the legislation back before this policy was created. And if council's present, you can be present for 5 minutes, as long as you're there and recorded as being present at any portion of the meeting, no matter how long that may be, you're considered to be present, and that's why that was written into the policy.
Okay, so we don't have a choice on that. All right. So what are other thoughts? Councilor McCreary?
I'm fine with the report that the clerk has written, and I would just accept the report as presented. I'm not
Councilor
concerned.
Rollerman. Thank you. Councilor Rollerman.
I'm fine with it.
Okay, and I'm fine with it too. So, Councilor Austin, do you wish to have it re-looked at, brought forward again at the next council meeting? Councilor Austin.
No, if the rest of council is fine with it, I'm fine with it. I just, this was, excuse me if I'm wrong, but did the present council, all 4 of us are the ones that developed this? Or was this done previous to Councilor McCreary and Councilor Gillespie?
Yeah, this was done by the previous term of council.
Okay, that's what I thought. I just wanted Councilor Gillespie and Councilor McCreary to be aware of what it stood for, why it was there, and just be aware that, you know, of what the implications were of it. But other than that, I'm fine if they want to move forward with it. That's fine.
Okay, so the vote, please.
So moved by Councillor Ossner and seconded by Councillor McCreary that report CLK-02-2021 be received, and that council amend policy number C-002, annual attendance reporting for members of council to include special council meetings and joint council meetings to the definition of meetings. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rollerman?
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie.
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. So next we have the motion to adjourn the committee of the whole and council meeting to be called back to order.
So moved by Councillor McCreary and seconded by Councillor Ossner, that committee of the whole is hereby adjourned and the council meeting be called back to order. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie.
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. And I believe next we have the adoption of the minutes. Is that correct?
We have the adoption of the recommendations that were presented by committee of the whole today.
Okay. Right. All right. So do you want to read? You do not have to read the whole motion. Do you want to hear it, guys? It's 2 pages long.
So moved by Councillor
I can make her read
Gillespie,
it.
seconded by Councillor McCreary, that council adopt the recommendations as adopted and presented by committee of the whole dated January 18th, 2021, and that's as presented. Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes, as long as the motion says we have the moratorium in place.
That's
Yeah,
right. So I'm not
that will
signing
be
this
a-
one. I will sign a change.
yeah, that will be revised
So
and
she will
already
revise.
signed. Yeah.
Okay, fine. Yes, then.
And Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. And now we're to the motion for the minutes, please.
So moved by Councillor Ossner, seconded by Councillor McCreary, that council approve the following minutes. Special council meeting minutes dated December 1st, 2020. Council meeting minutes dated December 14th, 2020. Special budget council meeting minutes dated January 11th, 2021. And special budget council meeting minutes dated January 12th, 2021. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
and Councillor Gillespie.
Yes.
Everybody's ahead. Okay, thank you. Next is a discussion on the correspondence from Bruce Shorney in regards to the Ring Road in Victoria Park. What are your thoughts? He's asking for it to be plowed. So as a walking type traffic type area, he enjoys it very much, and several others do as well. What are your thoughts? Councillor Ossner?
Has it been maintained in the past?
No.
Then I would say leave it as is.
Any other questions or comments? Councillor Rowland?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I walk through there every day with my dog, and you know, it hasn't been a problem walking on the snow. I don't think we need to plow it.
And no other thoughts? Okay, so we will just, the motion, please.
So moved by Councillor Rowland, seconded by Councillor McCreary, that the correspondence received from Bruce Shawnee requesting Ring Road in Victoria Park be included in the plow route be received. Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Sure, the reports, just receiving the report.
Yeah. Sorry, that was in
Yes.
favor?
Yes.
Okay. Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie,
Yes.
that carries.
Thank you. Next, we have all the correspondence. Does anybody want to speak on any items on the correspondence? Councillor Rowland?
I wanted to look at the 12.11, the resolution of Dufferin County regarding the assessment of the gravel pits. I'd like a little more information on that. And also the other one I wanted to look at was, is this the region? Are the region minutes in this section? No. I just lost my agenda, sorry.
So the Waterloo regional minutes are not in this section.
No, okay, so that's it for this time.
Okay, CO McNeely?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The resolution adopted by County of Dufferin is very similar to resolutions that have been adopted by Township Council. Excuse me, in 2020 as well as in 2019. And those earlier resolutions either came out of TAPO and or out of the County of Wellington. So Township Council has already adopted, and it is on record for a very similar concern or issue as what's presently being expressed by the County of Dufferin.
Councilor Roman.
Just to follow up, have we gained any traction? I mean, are we able to speak with the minister at Roma or anything like that? Is there any?
We had a lot of traction until the Minister of Finance got changed. And he's not meeting with anybody because he's brand new in this portfolio. Stan Cho, who is the Deputy Minister, was behind us 200%. He's amazing. I hope he's still on that ministry, because I know he backs us on this completely. So TAPMO is planning to try and set up a date to meet with the new minister in February, late February, March, to give him a chance to get his feet wet first. We had good traction with Phillips until this happened. So a little heartbreaking there, because now we're at scratch one again. But from what I've heard, this man is a banker. He understands. And I hope he realizes that a lot of our tax dollars is subsidizing aggregate, which I don't think we should be doing. But that's another point. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, you do not have to read the whole motion. Go ahead, Ms. Sage.
So moved by Councillor Rolliman and seconded by Councillor Gillespie that council receive for the purposes of information the following items. So as presented, items 12.1.1 through to items 12.1.14 as presented. Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rolliman?
Yes.
Councillor Ossner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. And next is the motion for the, hang on, sorry, getting my papers out here. The Strategic Shareholders Advisory Committee and the Heritage Advisory Committee minutes.
Certainly. So moved by Councillor Ossner and seconded by Councillor Gillespie that council receive for the purposes of information the following items. SSAC minutes dated November 19th, 2020, and the Heritage Advisory Committee minutes dated December 17th, 2020. Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rolliman?
Yes.
Councillor Ossner?
Yes.
Councillor McCreary?
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. I've always wondered what would happen if we said no. Also, if somebody said no to the adjournment, would we have to stay? Okay, the next is the meetings in regard to the regional ones, the GRCA, Energy Plus, and Grand River Accessibility. And Councilor Rolliman, I believe you have a question on the regional one?
I want to ask a question about the library budget. That's 12.3.5.
Okay.
Is that in this section?
Library, yes, I believe it is.
Yes, yes, it is.
Yes.
I was looking at the Taylor bequest, and in 2015 it was about 312,000, and now it shows in their books that they're down to 109,000. So was there a clarification as to how that money was spent? Was it spent in North Dumfries?
It was broken down. All of the money has gone into North Dumfries. Yes, it was broken down. I can't remember that breakdown right now. CO McNeely, we have that on file, do we not, somewhere? Or Ms. Stedall?
Yes, we requested that information previously and received the information back. Council dealt with it and reviewed where the expenditures were placed, and just reminded the library board that it should be spent on books and periodicals, because it was spent on furniture and some adjustments in the building at the time. So that information did go back to the library board.
Yeah, I was quite upset when that happened, and I demanded to know why they had done so without our permission or without following the bequest. They stated that they had an email from the brother of Taylor, and actually they provided the email. But going forward, I put new bylaw in that cannot be used for anything but what the original bequest stated, and everybody agreed with that. Councilor Rowland.
Madam Mayor, is there any chance the region is going to repay that money to us? Because if it was not used for what it was intended, are they going to replenish that that reserve back up to the amount that it should be?
No, because they had the family sign off on it, on an email. The Taylor family did sign off saying it was fine. So we would have to go to court and fight the brother and his email for giving consent. So with any other questions? Seeing none, can I have the motion, please?
So moved by Councillor Rowland, seconded by Councillor Gillespie, that council receive for the purposes of information the following items: Region of Waterloo minutes dated November 25th, 2020 and December 8th, 2020. Grand River Accessibility Advisory Committee minutes dated November 26th, 2020, and the Library Committee minutes dated December 4th, 2020. Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Okay, and then next we have first and second reading of the bylaws.
We do have other business, if there's any other business I'd like to. Item
All right.
13.
Anyone have any other business? Seeing none. Okay, let's go ahead with the first and second reading of the bylaw.
So moved by Councillor Gillespie and seconded by Councillor Rowland that the following bylaws be taken as read a first and second time. Bylaw number 3216-21 being a bylaw to amend the general zoning bylaw 689-83 for Techo Block. Bylaw number 3217-21 being a bylaw to amend the zoning bylaw for Mill Gates Holding located at 2852 Cedar Creek Road. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
That carries.
Thank you. And now third reading of the bylaw, please.
Moved by Councillor Rowland, seconded by Councillor McCreary that the following bylaws be taken as read a third time and finally passed. Bylaw number 3216-21 being a bylaw to amend general zoning bylaw for Techo Block, and bylaw number 3217-21 being a bylaw to amend zoning bylaw for Mill Gates Holding Limited located at 2852 Cedar Creek Road. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
Okay, that carries.
Thank you. And the confirmatory bylaw, please.
Moved by Councillor Rowland, seconded by Councillor Gillespie, that bylaw number 3218-21, being a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of council on January 18th, 2021, be read a first, second, third time and be finally passed, signed, and sealed by the mayor and clerk. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
Yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?
Yes.
That
Thank you.
carries.
And the adjournment, please.
Moved by Councillor Gillespie and seconded by Councillor Rowland that whereas business before this council meeting has been completed at 8:01 p.m. and be it resolved that this meeting adjourns and meets again on Tuesday, January 19th at 7 o'clock for a public planning meeting. So Mayor Foxton, your vote on that?
Yes.
Councillor Rowland,
Yes.
Councillor Ossner,
If I say no.
Then you're the only
Yes.
one that stays.
Okay, then, yes.
Councillor McCreary,
Yes.
Councillor Gillespie?